We're taking you live to Brisbane now, where Queensland opposition leader David Crisafulli is speaking about the housing crisis.
Out of a tent, and we're better than that as a state.
So do we know where that money's gone?
I'll get Tim to speak to some of the specific projects, but we're dealing with projects where sites have been identified and not a single bit of activity has occurred, and we don't see a pipeline coming through this calendar year where any more than a few dozen Queenslanders will be living in any of these dwellings. Did you want to explain something?
Sure, yeah. Well, the Minister came out recently, just overnight, to say that a lot of their funding's gone to emergency housing. Well, that's not a long-term solution. That's actually a recognition that there is an issue where people need to be housed immediately. But the problem that we have is a longer-term issue, and that is we must increase the supply of housing. There's no use the government going out and buying houses that are already built. That's just making the rental situation even worse. So it's hard to sort of fathom, after 2.5 years, why action has not taken place. And you can only come to the conclusion that it's all about the announcement. Well, those announcements are not housing our most vulnerable people, whether it's family or whether it's those that have a disability. That's the situation that needs to be addressed. And the other areas of great concern is that they are just not empowering the community housing sector. We have a sector there right throughout the state that is biting at the bit to get into helping the government solve these issues. But the government's not enabling them, not facilitating them, and not helping them to grow. That's something that will change under an LNP government.
What would you do? What is your idea? You have those relationships in place with development to start wrapping on that, like I said, not current housing in place, but planning where those houses can be developed?
Well, we've got to provide a policy framework that provides incentives for the private sector to come into this market, not disincentives. So what we've seen from this government is disincentives. When the Treasurer brought out the renters tax, I mean, that's not the type of thing that encourages people to invest into housing. We've got to get the community housing sector mobilised and to a stage where they can make a very credible contribution to this problem that we have at the moment. They want to do that, but the government talks that they support the community housing sector, but they don't in reality. We have the weakest community housing sector in the nation because the government doesn't respect. We need to have everybody on board, whether it's the private sector, whether it's community housing sector, of course government, and all departments working together. That obviously is not happening. The government is dragging the chain. 9 long years and the housing crisis only gets worse.
One more point. We're the only state. He said, "You've got to find me." Very good. We're the only state in the nation over the last 8 years where community housing's gone backwards. Now, in that same period, many states have added many thousands of extra dwellings under that sector. And you can speak to the community housing sector about what things were like when Tim was the Minister. We've got to empower them. We have to welcome them back. We have to allow them to be part of the solution. We have to make sure that social housing is built on time and on budget. We have to make sure that the private sector's there. But right now, the government's failing right across the board. People don't believe they can own their own home. People are struggling to pay rent and find rentals. And social housing is going backwards. That is a failure of epic proportions.
To get you just your thoughts on the reports of the culture at the moment in Newcastle, especially with the reports about pretty bad workplaces.
Well, we want public servants to go to work and feel valued and respected, and we want to make sure that we attract the best to join the ranks and make sure we value and respect the ones who are there. And it's important that ministers who lead departments and lead these organisations are held accountable for the culture and the feeling of self-worth. Now, if you have a look at whatever the frontline service is in Queensland, whether it's police, fireys, teachers, nurses, doctors, when you speak to frontline public servants, they tell you they're under more pressure than ever before. And that's because the government hasn't properly listened and resourced them, but it's also they haven't given the culture to put them in charge. And it's up to ministers to make sure that culture in departments are at a point that people want to go to work and they want to feel valued and respected, and they can be part of providing world-class services for Queenslanders.